I'm Catherine Hendy, co-founder of ELANZA Wellness, and I'm really delighted to be joined today by Emma Menzies. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Emma, would you just take us back to the very beginning of your fertility journey, how you first discovered that things might not be smooth sailing?
Well, my journey started about 9.5 years ago now, and we got married. I was 32, and we started trying pretty much straight away. I suppose we started actually not preventing, if I'm being totally honest, and I think that kind of in my generation we'd been led to believe that that was pretty much enough. So we had high expectations that it would happen really quickly. And then we kind of upped the ante and started really properly trying, and it still wasn't happening for us. And around the year mark, we thought maybe we were okay up to that point, but we're thinking around a year, maybe we should start looking into this. And we did, but shortly after that, I did fall pregnant naturally. So I thought, yeah, this is it for us. But at our 12-week dating scan, there was no heartbeat, and we found out that we'd had a miscarriage. And really, that was like the real turning point for us. And from that point on, we went on to have difficulties conceiving. By the following year, we were being seen in fertility clinics. And over the course of the years, we had, I think, all of the investigations that we could have. We had one IUI and then several rounds of IVF, ICSI, frozen embryo transfers. And the few pregnancies that we did have, most of which actually were natural again rather than through treatment, all resulted in miscarriage. And we tried all of the add-ons. We did several rounds of immune therapy. We saw nutritionists, acupuncturists, changed our diet, changed our lifestyle. I mean, you name it, we did it. And increasingly, it became really difficult to manage. And, I got more and more desperate, more and more low, had some really dark moments through those years. And yeah, it was a difficult time. And 6 years and a bit in was when I completely burnt out. And that was kind of the next turning point in our journey, really, at that stage. But that was the sort of earlier part of it.
Do you feel like there was enough support at the time?
I think it's interesting because at the time, at the time of the first miscarriage, but also in the years that were following, going through the journey, those first 6 years, at that time, I didn't feel that there was enough support for working out why I was having these miscarriages and helping me to conceive. So I felt like I was being let down with the sort of physical part of the process of trying to become a mum by our National Health Service, which I know things are different in the US, but for me, in this country, it's 3 miscarriages before you can get that looked into. And that meant a lot of my fertile years went before I had the 3rd miscarriage, and I could get that kind of support. So I felt let down in that respect. And also because I didn't qualify for any support with fertility treatment on the NHS, because I'd conceived naturally first time round, and it didn't matter that hadn't resulted in a baby. I'd conceived naturally. So for the rest of my journey, even though like 9.5 years on, I still don't have an explanation or a baby, that ruled me out for any kind of support. And so at the time, I felt that was lacking. But interestingly, at the time, even though I felt completely unsupported, completely alone, and really, really struggling and stuck and in need of support, I didn't feel like the problem was lack of support. I thought the problem was me. At that point in time, I thought that I should be okay and that I wasn't being let down by lack of support. I thought the problem was I should be okay and I should be able to handle this. and therefore it's my issue. It's only with the benefit of hindsight that, looking back now, I realise there was so much support that I would have benefited from and that I did need, outside of just the, okay, why am I miscarrying and how can I get pregnant again, to do with really my physical, mental and emotional well-being. And I do know now that it would have been a different journey for me if that had been available, or I'd been making myself available to that at the time.
I read a great blog post that you wrote where you spoke about some of the medical care that you received as being very matter of fact when it came to those real emotional moments. And, you were sort of handed a leaflet and that was it. What sort of support would you have wanted to receive, or what kind of connection maybe with medical professionals might have made things feel a bit more manageable?
I felt that, there's an example that you're talking about was that sort of first miscarriage. And I was very much told at the time, don't worry, you'll be pregnant again in no time. This is all, you'll get over this sort of thing and you'll be fine and you'll be pregnant and you'll have your baby and it'll all be great and you've forgotten about this in a few months. So my first message would be, really be careful what you say, because all of these years on, I still don't have my family. And at that time, being told that felt really dismissive of the pain that I was feeling, which all of that reinforced the messages that I made mean at the time. I'm supposed to be okay and I'm not supposed to struggle with this, because there feels to be a bit of a sort of flippancy around it. And also the fact that I was being told, you are going to be pregnant again in no time and this isn't something to worry about, meant that when that didn't happen, it made me feel even more like I was a problem and I needed fixing and I was broken in some way. So I think medical professionals really do need to be careful what they say, and sometimes even the language that's used. And there's some awful language in fertility, and I know some of it is medical terms, but I think if more care can be taken how it's delivered, just with the pregnancy sort of things, it's like, I can't remember the exact words, but it's certainly not talking about it as your fetus or your baby. It's very sort of scientific for terms. And then you come across later in life, as I do now, all this stuff about geriatric, for geriatric, I can't remember those, or, advanced maternal age, oh, thanks very much. And and then there was, with immune stuff, to talk about NK killer cells. And I know these are scientific terms, but so a lot of it can really impact on your mindset. And, again, the sort of stories we tell ourselves and what we make things mean, that can add to some of the suffering on the journey. So, yeah, I think taking care with the words that you use and the things that you say is really important.
I think because it feels so much like, and for obvious reasons, like a very clinical process, particularly from the clinics, and that's their core competency, that's what they're there for. But it's not just clinical, is it? It's
absolutely not. And the difference, I think, between the clinics, certainly where I felt more comfortable, to those that I haven't, is when, putting the patient and the life that's trying to be created at the heart of everything, but remembering that for them, this is one of the most physically, mentally, emotionally, financially challenging things that they're going to go through. And it's huge. It's life-changing, or potentially life-changing. And being able to talk to them, all of the time, almost making them feel like they're the only patient, or that this kind of compassion and empathy and understanding of what they're going through, I think is really important. You want to feel like you're a real person, and also that your contributions and your thoughts are valued, your questions aren't too much, and so on.
So you were a lawyer around about this time period that we're talking about. I'm really curious, what was it like trying to balance that busy life, professional life, with everything that was going on?
Well, for me, it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. My job was a pretty big pressurized job, and the hours were long anyway with that. And then I had this fertility journey, and I honestly felt like I had 2 full-time jobs, with the actual being a lawyer job and then the fertility journey as well, which even if I wasn't sort of logistically engaged in it full-time, then mentally and emotionally I was. And, you know, I wanted to do my job well, but I wanted to give myself the best chance of success of becoming a mum as well. And the longer that journey went on, and I was experiencing, to put in inverted commas, failure, you know, the harder I was pushing at that, and the more I was trying to do, the more stone I would want to leave no stone unturned, you know, and do everything perfectly. So that combination of really trying to drive both at the same time, I found that the fertility side of things would impact my performance and my progression with my career. My career felt like it was impacting my performance and my progression in terms of the fertility journey, all of it affecting my well-being. And ultimately, it was the combination of those two things. One of those things on their own would seem to be big enough to use up all of my energy, all my reserves, but the two together, eventually that is what meant that I ultimately burnt out.
Is that kind of why you started focusing specifically around career and fertility as your coaching area?
Well, I think I was employment lawyer specifically, so I was advising all of the time on the sort of issues that are relevant to people on a fertility cycle in the workplace, things like attendance and performance and flexibility, discrimination, and so on. And from time to time, I did advise on cases to do with fertility issues happening in the workplace, although they didn't come up a lot, which speaks volumes in itself, actually. My background was very much in work matters, workplace matters, and career matters from a professional perspective. And then I was on this fertility journey myself. So it felt like I had a natural interest in those two worlds.
And so did that involve some training? And what sorts of things do you work with people on now?
I did retrain. I spent a couple of years retraining. So I'm a qualified coach and then LNLP as well, as you said at the beginning. The sort of things that people come to me with, I think, first of all, the people who do come to me, I think it's worth mentioning that, you know, they're generally capable, competent people used to experiencing a certain amount of success. You know, they've been able to go after what it is they want in life and make it happen. Then they found themselves on this fertility journey where all the previous strategies for success just aren't working, and they tend to fall into the habits that I fell into, is then, okay, well, I'll just push harder, I'll just do more, I'll plan more, I'll analyze more, I'll research more, I'll investigate more, I'll do more, I'll do it even better, I just need to get better, I just need to be more perfect, all of that. And then when it doesn't work, that does lead to feelings of lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, failure, hopelessness, helplessness. And that's the person that then has to show up at work. And I think we can't ignore that, because that's the context in terms of other problems that then arise in the workplace as well. And that can exacerbate some of them. But some of the more direct challenges that people have that I hear about are holding back in careers or in roles. So, you know, staying stuck in a role or in a career that's no longer rewarding or fulfilling or that you enjoy, and you know, thinking that you can't have any kind of change of career or progression until you've got pregnant, gone on maternity leave, and in particular quite often had maternity pay. There's this sort of fixed mindset that now's not the time. But then the longer the fertility stuff isn't working out, this building of lack of fulfilment and frustration and boredom and being fed up and feeling like life is stuck and on hold, that really builds and has an impact on our well-being. Another one is just the juggling act. As I mentioned, I'd found it was like 2 full-time jobs. It's that, how do I do everything on my fertility to-do list and on my work to-do list, and the pressure of wanting to do it all and do it well, but worried that if you give to one, you're going to take for the other. And you need to know that you've done it all well to know that you know you've not jeopardized chances of success, but not wanting to let anyone down. And things like that can often lead to some knee-jerk decisions as well around postponing treatments maybe, or resigning, or reducing hours, reducing responsibilities, when perhaps that wasn't exactly what was wanted, but it's just trying to find mechanisms to cope.
Hearing that, one big word is coming up in my mind, which is stress. And it's so interesting hearing you talk about how on the one hand there's career, and then there's, you know, fertility struggles or fertility treatment pathway, and that they're not these two things in a bubble. They're not existing in their own vacuums in your life. They're actually so interconnected as part of your wider experience, and that optimizing one can mean optimizing the other, and in the negative sense too. So is stress something in particular that you work to moderate with people? Is that really what you're tackling?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and that's sort of, there is this trying to find this balance as well between work and the right, that's different, that balance is different and falls at a different line for different people, to be able to manage career and fertility journey alongside each other, and manage stress, because quite often the fertility journey is stressful. Often people find there's stress in their careers, and then those two worlds are colliding, and trying to get them both going together is stressful. Stress is involved in kind of whatever the issues are that are brought to the table. Stress is there somewhere normally.
Why would somebody maybe work with a fertility coach as opposed to a counsellor or a therapist, or do you work actually together?
And with coaching, we don't deal with emotional trauma and psychological issues. That would be within the expertise of a counsellor. Secondly, I suppose with coaching is very much a forward-looking process. So we're trying to get our clients from where they are to where it is that they want to be. So in the context of my work, which is career coaching, it's generally from, you know, stuck and struggling in your career and on this fertility journey to, you know, enjoying a meaningful career that brings out the best in you, that works with your lifestyle, works with this journey that you're on towards parenthood. So that's very forward looking. And if I use an analogy of driving, you kind of, with coaching, you're mainly looking forward, and you occasionally glance back at what's happened before and to the sides to see what's happening around you to help you with that onward journey. I think with other therapies, you can spend more time looking back about what's happened in the past and what's happening in the present to understand where you are. Whereas with coaching, we're much more likely to accept this is where we are and now where do we want to be. So there are a couple of key distinguishing features between coaching and counselling. In terms of like fertility coaching, I think is more geared around the kind of getting to baby. At least that's sort of my understanding of it. Whereas the coaching that I'm doing is career coaching for people on a fertility journey, which is geared a lot more around being able to manage your career whilst you're on that journey, because, you know, managing a career can very much set you up physically, mentally, emotionally, sometimes financially, to be able to better cope with that journey. So it's not about necessarily getting to baby, but being able to be happy, fulfilled anyway on this journey. And you know, you talked about managing stress, and we all know stress is no good for fertility, but some of the lessons and things that you can learn whilst focusing on a career can very much then become helpful on a fertility journey. But as I say, we're not focused specifically on how do we make this baby.
And do you think actually moving the focus off that, particularly if somebody has been hyper-focused on it for quite a long time, that can be helpful in a number of ways?
Absolutely. And I can use my own circumstances on this, because when I did burn out, and that was sort of the next turning point in my journey, I had that time to reflect, and I realised that I was relying completely on having a baby to be happy and putting my life on hold for that day to come, when I could actually be being happy now. And it was this sort of dawning that I'd got so used to blaming everything that I didn't like in my life on the fact that I didn't have a baby, and seeing having a baby is the only solution. So there's this kind of complete focus on external circumstances and waiting for them to change to create more of this life that I wanted, and being so tunnel visioned on this sort of physical process of becoming a mother. When I redirected my attention to where's the other area of my life where things just don't feel like they're working, to my career, I was able to see how I had more control over having more of the life that I wanted, and I could see how ways I was thinking and operating weren't working for me, and that's when I started to be able to make changes. And that meant that I went on a transformation from someone who was miserable, burnt out, desperately needing a baby, to somebody who is now, has a healthy want for a baby, which is something very different, and is happy and fulfilled most of the time. Definitely not perfect. And it's not like I don't still get stressed and have down days, absolutely do, but managing this journey with far greater ease than I was before. And that, I suppose, is the sort of transformation that I try and help my clients with. And that's kind of my success story from my journey at the moment.
And finally, I just want to ask, do you have any nuggets of wisdom, so be they tools or exercises that you use in your processes, or just some reflections from your own journey that you would like to share with anybody facing their own fertility struggles?
I suppose I would have two key ones that I'll share now, just sort of building on what we've just been talking about. I think the first one is be really careful about this whole looking externally to lay blame for what you don't want and try and create what you do want, and giving your power away, basically. There's a lot of that on this journey, giving away to circumstances, as I was saying, like waiting for the baby to make you happy, but giving it away to doctors, thinking that they, that they have all of the answers. They're experts in medicine, they're not experts in you. Giving it away to other people pleasing, worrying what they think, and also potentially blaming or criticizing them for suffering. I think the more you can come back to getting to know you and being the expert in you, the better. And really, I would encourage people to try and do that. Get to know what you want, what you need, what feels good to you, what feels right to you, what your motivations are, your priorities, and let that be the basis on which you make your decisions and take your action. Really own that. It's not the easiest thing to do. Coaching can help you with that, definitely. But I think one way to make a start is to keep asking yourself powerful questions like, what is it that I think that I do need? What is it that I think this is trying to teach me here? What do I think this is really about? That kind of thing. So I think that would be my first sort of recommendation. The other one would be to really, and this isn't easy, but to try and be mindful of your thoughts and the impact that can have on how you feel and what you do. Because we kind of like, we have values, we have beliefs, and we have attitudes that are kind of come from our culture, from our prior experiences that shape what we do think, which then does impact how we feel and the things that we do, which impacts the results we get. So essentially, some of our suffering on this journey can come back to what we're thinking, which doesn't mean that it's our fault, because this happens, very sort of unconsciously, automatically. It's a habitual thing. It's part of our conditioning, as I mentioned. So it's not about laying blame, but it does mean we can do something about it. So, going back to what we were talking about earlier, sort of, I had a belief that I should be okay after, that the problem wasn't lack of support. I had a belief that I was just supposed to be okay. And that meant that I felt like I was failing. And it meant that I didn't seek out support. I just tried to push on. Now, if I'd been able to bring my awareness to what I was making things mean, the stories I was telling myself, what I was thinking, if I was being able to sort of challenge that and think, is it really true that I should be okay? Like, what proof do I have of that? What else could this mean? I might have then felt very differently and taken a different course of action, maybe sought out some support, and things may have gone a different way. So it's really sort of, what is it you're making things mean? What are you telling yourself? And how might that be impacting? What might you do differently if you were to challenge and change that? And as I say, that isn't an easy thing to do. It's a lot easier, more effectively, more quickly done working with a coach. But if you want to make a start, I think when you're not feeling good or you're not getting your results you want, try and track it back and think, what's my thinking here? And ask some of those powerful questions like, is that really true? How do I know that to be the case? What else might be? And I do have a document which can help with that, which I'm happy if people wanted to go onto my website, readysteadycoach.com, and you can send me a message through the contact form and just mention that you've been on this webinar and you want the sort of thought management document. I'm happy to send that out, and that does give some tips for how you can do it on your own. But it definitely takes some practice and a lot of curiosity, and it's a skill that needs to be developed, but coaches can definitely help with it.
Emma, thank you so much for sharing your own story, your own experiences, and some great tips there. It's been brilliant, I think, hearing from someone not just professionally trained, but with personal experience as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.